So I'm watching another Coen Brothers movie. I know I commented on them before, so I was watched the majority before I ever began commenting. So yeah, but I never watched a Serious Man. So I'm watching it for the first time about physics tutor. Now I thought it's unfair that at the beginning when the student asks for retake. I mean, why not? He says it's unfair for the students. Or, you know, I mean, I don't know about some some institutions, but the ones I had experience with did the retakes, at least one retake for all students. So yeah, it wouldn't be unfair. So I don't get it. But yeah, I was just wondering. And yeah, this tale is supposed to be a rehash essentially of Book of Job, apparently, despite it being, no, I suppose, and assuming, yeah, that's one, I think one of the earliest books. So, um, but you know, it doesn't quite. I mean, yeah, it can be interesting in parts. It can be darkly funny in other parts, but it's very consistently dark. I mean, it's practically like watching someone's. I mean, it's realistic. That's sure enough, it's realistic, but mm, it's not escapist, is it? That's essentially it. It's really not. And still, I mean, if it's not escapist, so then what is it exactly? Like, does it even? Because of course, it doesn't quite have any sort of resolution. It really enjoys the fact that it doesn't have any resolution. It's all about something happening, nothing coming out of it. It's just chaos, and that's pretty much it. We just, you know, I mean, there were some interesting bits, but it doesn't quite have anything all encompassing, does it? Now I still like it more than the other movies that are mostly much more violent. They have quite a lot of movies which are violent. It's sort of like half and half, isn't it? Some are violent, some aren't, but most have this dark sense of humor. The ones that are violent, though, I just cannot quite integrate the humor with it. Because, if you get violent stuff and also somehow funny stuff, it just doesn't meld together very well, in my opinion. This, on the other hand, at least there isn't much violence. There isn't. I mean, there's a deep dream sequence, and the protagonist having his head bashed, which is also a dream sequence actually. But other than that, yeah, it's not much. But no, the problem, of course, is but it's all part of the dark part of the humor, I suppose. So despite all this troubling stuff, what he terms as, wait, what was that word? Um, Let me check. This movie also had loads of words that I had no idea about. So anyway, it's sort of like a crash course in Yiddish. So yeah, he mentions tourists once, which remarkably sounds like tourists, but never mind. Um, sure enough, it means troubles and such. I'd never heard of it before, but yeah, go. So yeah, there was a lot of tourists, and but the result isn't much of anything. There isn't a result. There really isn't. I mean, it's just might as well be a documentary. Of course, it's fictional, but no one still has any idea why they did that. thing at the beginning. I expected some sort of reference throughout, but nope, none at all. And yeah, let's go through the list of words that I had to look up. It's quite numerous. Usually I look up like slang or something. In this case, of course, it's more of a it's just like a dialectical language, isn't it? It's not quite English, but it's not quite a separate language. So there was also love, or however it's pronounced, love, which I think it's spelled Lviv or such. That's how it's spelled at least. Um, Apparently I found out that different parts of the country and such pronounce it differently for political reasons, I'm assuming. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, there was quite a lot of words that I looked up. So, of course, I'm not entirely sure I remember them all. I just, read what they were at that point. But yeah, at this point, I'm not entirely sure. Remember some, but no. Yeah, so there was Droshki, Sohar, Verb, Mishnah, Day Book. That's one word that I remember, Day Book. I suppose it's sort of like zombie, I suppose. Not sure. More like a, yeah. There's definitely parallels to other mythology. At any rate, it's definitely an interesting sort of thing. Um, there was also this word aguna, which reminded me of guana, I think, but it's obviously pronounced differently. Never heard of that though. Get, of course, with double T. I had actually never heard of F Troop before when it was mentioned that this was supposed to be 760s, so yeah, I've never seen F Troop. I had never heard of a compact section machine. I still have no idea what they do, and I don't think it's anything too wholesome. Mentaculous, I think, is a fictional thing that they invented for this movie. Then there was something Etzmonim, and I couldn't even find it. So yeah, I'm not sure if they just a bit bizarre how it came up. And yeah, that guy, the junior rabbi, I hadn't seen Big Bang Theory for a while, many years now. But of course, one cannot divorce characters in such long-running series after no matter how much time passes, really. And that's the one where he wasn't as funny though as he is in Big Bang Theory. Still interesting though what he says. So yeah, I had to look up Hashem as well. I wasn't quite aware, but sure, I actually tried to look up the whole as well. Although they kept spelling it whole. But apparently it's whole with W. I'm not sure. Some sort of underground club apparently. Someone said Tzatzik as well. What was it again now? Something to do with heaven, which apparently Olam Hab. Never mind. Yeah. One point, Aster art was mentioned, and apparently there isn't really any specific reference to anything specific. Just someone called Aster and her art or whatever. Not really, and yeah. So anyway, I also found out what a Kiddush cup was. We've thought that had something to do with it being given to, a young person, which is why, it begins like that, but no, it doesn't seem like it. I also had no idea what a chopper was, but yeah, I thought it was like a... Anyway, regardless, this is completely relevant. So, as I said, though, it's one of those things, where it's fiction. Fiction is supposed to be escapist, but it's really not. And yeah, it's not quite. It's not like I need a movie to make sense, right? Like so I sort of kept comparing this with an actually favorite movie of mine, which is somewhat similar, but it has much more. So, Pi, right? So just Pi, 2.14. It's all about numerology, though. Whereas here, the farthest they went was when they found some letters within the teeth, which was just bizarre. But yeah, they found that, and then he converted it to numbers, and he went to the place where he called and didn't find anything. Because often numerology doesn't mean much of anything at all. In fact, most of the times it means nothing. But well, the fact that letters can translate into numbers is interesting in itself. So yeah, anyway, pi is all about numerology, though. I don't think they concluded anything either, other than insanity, But yeah, I thought pi was a very, very great depiction of insanity, mathematical insanity, if you will, you know. But it was so much more intense, in my opinion. This wasn't really intense per se, but negative things kept happening. Whereas in pi, negative things seemed almost, you know, it still resonated with me more for some reason. I haven't seen it for a few years, so I cannot quite commentate on it very clearly. But I still very much like it. I should watch it at some point soon again. It's quite cool. I thought it's um yeah. I mean, kind of like it was actually more similar to A Beautiful Mind than anything else. With regards to mathematicians becoming insane and such. So this, on the other hand, slightly adjacent to it. He's a physics teacher, but he doesn't quite. Physics isn't quite mentioned very much, unlike A Beautiful Mind, where maths is much more central. Um, but otherwise, yeah, it's the life of someone who tries to keep an academic look at life and somehow fails, and so much so that he even compromises his own morality when it comes to academic. I guess just non-corruption, I suppose one could say. Yeah. Other than that, I'm not entirely sure. I just it's a kind of an aimless Cohen movie. I don't think most of them are aimless. Usually, I mean, they're usually pretty chaotic, but they usually have some sort of objective. Not quite usually, often all the time, but some. I don't know. This feels very aimless though, and obviously the more violent ones usually do have much more of an aim, and then you get others. I think this is more comparable to, from what I can remember, because I haven't seen them in a few years as well now. So yeah, I haven't seen a Cohen for a few years. I think that's mostly comparable to Hail Caesar. I think that was sort of similar sort of humor here and there with I remember. Yeah, never mind. So yeah, but other than that, um, it's not like I didn't like it so much, but it seemed to get a lot of rewards and even an Oscar nominee. And in a way, so it's sort of similar to the film I watched recently, Wonder Wheel. I also commented on. It's similarly aimless. It begins and ends in a similar sort of fashion, but doesn't really resolve much throughout. Like literally in this movie, you know, his wife was going to go with someone else, but then she doesn't, so she remains there, and I think Her husband moves in back. Not much changes except for negative things that keep on happening, and they just keep on happening up until the very end, very very end. While the tornado was a great sight to see. Well, if you're actually there live, if you're actually one of the students, apparently he couldn't open the garage or something, or wherever the secure place was. Couldn't be opened. I've read at least that quite an impression when I watched, but you know negative things can happen. Obviously, the phone call that he had last there was obviously the most troublesome, and of course it ends regardless. Of course, they begin this movie by saying, people should take things simply. Whatever comes, they should take simply. I guess uh, experience them in stride per se. But how does one do that? Indeed, I mean, at one point he just breaks down and cries. Honestly, that's the most uh, reasonable response, I guess. I don't know, just other than escaping it all. Honestly, why not escape it all? Uh, sure enough, if I had all those problems and some record guy kept phoning, honestly, in that case, I'd just simply refer them to the person who actually entered into this contract. But seriously, so many things kept happening. You know, then you get that lawyer guy who just suddenly fell dead on his feet. He didn't even say a single word. I mean, how many bad things can happen in a single movie? It wasn't even violent, but negative things kept happening, just continuous, like a negative, perpetual negative machine. As if somehow, as a physics teacher, he invented a perpetual negative machine. So much energy producing, but well, maybe energetic, yeah, but only negative energy, antimatter as such. I don't know. But really, I probably would have enjoyed it more if it had more physics actually in it. I don't know, not just equations either. I mean, I wouldn't have minded more of the stories, more of the fables. And yet somehow it ended up as a. Honestly, I thought it would be more interesting because physics is mentioned prominently there in a synopsis as a physics teacher, and yet all we see is just equations and only for like not even 5 minutes of that, only 2 minutes max. That's the extent of his physics tutoring. Besides, obviously, the arguments with the guy who wants a different grade and a bribe, but that's not quite physics. It's just, I mean, there is a mention of physics, but other than that, though, there's really not much else. This is why I think Pi is so much better, though, because there it's integrated within it. Like you get the maths, you get the numerology, you get the insanity all at once. It it is much more intense. That's why I loved it. And here we get yeah, just a bit of an academic sort of nerdiness, and then we get most of the movie is simply relationships, and kind of like the other movie I watched recently about also about um, another Jewish tradition, the Shiva, which was also mentioned in this movie, but eh, I like this movie better somehow still because the other movie actually did have much more talk of relationships. But even this movie did. I mean, this movie was predominantly about relationships. And obviously, negative things that happened within relationships. But at least it's not so much, oh yeah, he's dating there, and then he's dating the other. Oh, really? Oh, who cares? What was the other movie called again? Uh, yeah, this is where I leave you, right? It was all about relationships. I mean, it didn't quite have, the extent of its Judaism was Shiva there, so that's all I had to look up back there. Here I had to look up much more. But besides that, obviously I don't base my liking on whether I have to look up stuff or not. No, but um, let's just say that I don't so much like the fact that if the more relationships there are doesn't translate in a better movie, in my opinion. In fact, I don't think in Pi the protagonist had many relationships at all, which is why he went insane, I suppose. But the point is the movie, right? And somehow there wasn't much of anything really that seemed enlightening or interesting. I mean, there were interesting moments, but the whole movie wasn't quite, kind of like how Coen Brothers said that, they only made the prologue, the initial sequence as a sort of short. Uh, they barely thought it integrated. They barely intended it to integrate into the rest of the movie. I don't know why that is. They should have. I mean, it just the whole movie thought still doesn't quite make sense in the sense, not because of this, but in a way, it doesn't make much sense. Just like the two parts don't make much sense with each other. I mean, sure, people can say, oh, the curse was inherited, etc., but there's no mention of it. Curses don't really exist either, so just I mean, obviously we use them as metaphors. That's the extent that curses exist. Really, just mostly, just metaphorical. Great, yeah, you get metaphors, but other than that, um, so yeah, uh, it just there was a lot of negativity, though, and I think that there is usually in other movies, but this was seriously negative, though. Like seriously, realistically negative. And the potential divorce was actually the least negative of them all, even though he somehow kept despairing over it. I mean, by all means, if one is in a loving relationship, then yeah, yes, it's tragic and all, but it didn't quite seem to be in a loving relationship, or at least wasn't displayed in the movie itself. So yeah, this is the point. So it would have been better if they just showed more of his maybe inner monologue sort of thing, like they did with Pi. Yeah, maybe. I mean, even comparing other movies, something like Barton Fink, I liked much more. Like there was also chaotic, it was also random, Kafkaesque and such, but um, uh, yeah, I just I did like more. It didn't quite conclude, but so yeah, I mean, it wasn't too dissimilar, but I don't think as many negative things happened. I mean, okay, I've last seen it years ago, so I cannot quite specify. But yeah, it seemed funnier, maybe not, or maybe more introspective. Whereas this wasn't so much. This was more of a well, but things are happening. Why are they happening, etc. Which is the Book of Job, I suppose. But um, there's still not much point, even though maybe lacking the a point was the point, but it still doesn't make much. I don't know. And they also directed the Lady Killers apparently. Yeah. I never quite associated with them, but that was definitely funnier from what I remember. Yeah, definitely funnier. But that's a remake, so not quite theirs per se. Um, even Burn After Reading was funnier, I thought, maybe, even though it was more violent. Apparently, they're doing a Macbeth in the future. Haven't seen Ballad of Buster Scruggs yet. Last one I've seen is Hail Caesar. I think I've seen it in the year it was released. So yeah. Other than that, Yeah, Big Lebowski was also sort of funny as well. Yeah. And yeah, I think I've seen Heinz Proxy as well, which I think was funnier. I think it was definitely funnier. It's quite something that they did. They also did Raising Arizona in between Miller's Crossing and Blood Simple. I don't think Raising Arizona was as violent as the those other two. I don't know how they can do this between violent and well, non-violent dark humor, I guess. Because Blood Simple and Miller's Crossing was seriously violent. I mean, other movies, even just even the ones that are just darkly humorous, can be a bit violent. Not quite as much as nothing in comparison. Even Fargo was pretty violent, or more of a detective mystery, I suppose. I've only seen the movie, haven't seen the series yet. But this is the thing that although with regards to you know the many awards it got and or could have gotten, this was in the same year that Hurt Locker came out, and apparently it got more awards than this one did. It's not that they're directly comparable, they're not really, but if there is one movie that I really have no idea why anyone thinks so highly of, I mean, besides, many others, that I've also commented on in the recent past and such. But you really hurt Locker. Really, I have no idea. I have no idea. It's all about it's all about the adrenaline. Apparently, people like adrenaline, and they awarded it because of that. I don't know. Apparently, it's all about the adrenaline, and that's pretty much it. So, in terms of that, this is the more sensible movie. So, despite all the criticism, not so much criticism as aimlessness. It's not so much deficiency as just chaos without boundaries, I suppose. But really, I mean, Harry Locker was even. I mean, Harry Locker, I thought, in my opinion, was dumb in this sense. I mean, in a sense that I don't know, just uh, besides the fact that it was, inaccurate. So this is kind of the main problem, I think. The fact that it is full of symbolism and everything, including obviously the ending with both the bar mitzvah and the tornado and such, and the phone. It's full, but they're only tips. They're only like the edges of something. I mean, symbolism should be accompanied by something that is substantial, I suppose. That's at least coherent, even when it comes to the whole story. I mean, if one compares it to, it's not directly comparable. There are yeah, something like Neon Genesis Evangelion. It also uses the Tree of Life and such, and the Kabbalah and such. But yeah, sure enough, it doesn't go too deep into it at all. So I mean, in a similar sense, it has symbolism, but not quite much more substantial within it. But regardless of that, it still has a plot, a central. I mean, this has a plot as well, but not Evangelion isn't just about relationships. It's also about something more, something abstract, something that makes sense, despite. So I mean, it builds on this fiction, whereas this just has symbolism when it comes to like a synchronicity with their car crashes and such, but not really much more than that. There isn't any big sort of story that encompasses everything that the old rabbi reveals or something. It just I'm not saying that there should or shouldn't be, but it feels a bit empty without as it is. Just dark and empty. That's the problem.